I said I'm not hearing the open. Is it 30 seconds to the open? Okay. Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Over the next hour, we're going to touch on all the home teams. We'll talk about the Saints, LSU, Tulane, and Pelicans. We're also going to touch on high school football as well. Got a great guest for you tonight. Our guest on the panel, both returning guests tonight, Jude Young of SportsNola.com and freelance journalist Bradley Handwerger. And gentlemen, thanks for coming down and welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here.
As always, we'd like to tell folks a little bit about what's going on with you guys. And if you would, Jude, why don't you start off first and tell us a little bit about your radio show, what's going on at WGSO, and of course, SportsNola.com.
Yes, along with my duties at SportsNola.com as an editor and contributor, 2 nights a week on Tuesdays and Wednesdays on WGSO 990 AM. I have my radio show from 6 to 7 p.m. And right now, in another season, I'm the voice of the Privateers, UNO men's basketball. You can catch our games on UNOprivateers.com. Just getting warmed up for basketball season, but we have plenty of football to talk about tonight.
Yeah, no doubt. Bradley, welcome back. And of course, writing a column tell us a little bit about what you're doing, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I'm just kind of trying to keep my hand in the game right now, tweeting comments. Probably some not safe for public consumption, but also writing a column once a week for your website, which I appreciate.
Right, EricAsher.com, and also stringing for
the Associated
Press as well. Well, thanks again for coming down, and we're going to have a lively discussions tonight. This is a live broadcast. 866-3200 is the phone number if you'd like to get involved. And we normally don't start this way, but Jude, I'd like to start with high school football tonight.
Sure.
You do a lot with high school football. Tell us a little bit about what's going to happen in the Dome this weekend.
Well, it's just Friday, tomorrow, the first 4 of 9 championships to be decided this month. I know it's funny. Second year this has happened with the select schools, basically private schools, deciding their champions in 4 different divisions starting at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Local teams involved just in the top division, Division 1, and it is one heck of a matchup at 8:30 or so, probably a little bit later in the Dome tomorrow night, and that is John Curtis versus Jesuit. They've never met. John Curtis has never played up as far as they're allowed to in the LHSA. Their first year doing it, they had to go through one Catholic League school in Brother Martin. Now they played Jesuit. Jesuit hasn't been to the Superdome for a championship game since 1978. So this will be a large crowd indeed. In just the first weekend of this, the public schools or the non-selects will play on Friday and Saturday next weekend.
Yeah. Surprise, Rummel, Jesuit, that Jesuit came out on top. A lot of people that I've been talking to thought that Rummel may have been the better team.
Rummel was probably considered by most to be the best overall football team in the state in any class or division. They're the 2-time defending state champions. They won a 5A championship before the switch over to Division 1, but they only defeated Jesuit 10-7 in the regular season, the game that ultimately decided the Catholic League title, and Jesuit actually outgained Rummel in that game. Their quarterback, Trey LaForge, excellent player, didn't play as well as he did in the rematch. He was outstanding. Jesuit's short passing game really worked. They jumped out to a 28-7 lead, won 28-14, and I'm sure surprised many in Blue Jay Nation. I'm an alum and certainly proud of them and respect what Jay Roth and Rummel have done. Mark Sonji, a great story, the head coach of Jesuit, in his first year back. He was the head coach before, but he took over during the summer when Wade Kaiser stepped down for personal reasons, and now he's got them in a state championship game, and it doesn't happen often on Carrollton and Banks.
Got to be exciting. What about John Curtis? What type of program are they this year?
They may be a little bit less than we're used to for a program that's won 26 state championships. The only real issue is the passing game at quarterback. I know they run the V or the triple option. That's the bread and butter of JT Curtis, but if they have a weakness, it's that Miles Washington, their quarterback, would be best off as a running back in perfect circumstances. They haven't thrown the ball with much success all year, and that may give Jesuit a real chance because their front seven is about as disciplined as they come, and they were able to match up twice against Rummel, which tells you a lot.
Select, non-select, public, private, when you talk about this new format, What do you see happening with this format going forward?
It could be determined mostly by the leadership that's coming in. I've heard that they've chosen a new executive director and he has experience, and that won't be announced until sometime next week. But his presence will help a lot because they need leadership right now. There's such a divide. Principals vote across the board on every issue, and clearly there are more public schools than private schools, and they've been carrying the water, and that's why we have this convoluted system that's in place now. They have an annual meeting in January, and that's where a lot of this is going to be decided. And if they don't get it right, Eric, there's going to be a split.
Yeah.
And we don't want to see that.
No, we surely don't. How many championships this year?
9.
9. Even Bradley had trouble with it. 9.
Participation ribbon
Yeah.
for
You get
everybody.
a trophy, you get a trophy, you get a
I
trophy.
said it on my radio show today. It's like when I used to coach my kids in soccer. Everybody got a trophy. Wow, how things have changed. Well, guys, let's shift gears and talk a little about the Saints. Again, you look at this team, 5-7 now. Their big win against Pittsburgh. I didn't think it was going to happen. 35 to 32. They've lost 3 at home. They're winners of 2 straight on the road. And I guess the first, before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of the game, I want to talk a little about some of the stuff surrounding the team right now. And first off, on Sunday, we found out, at least through a report, that Sean Payton and Rob Ryan not getting along. They don't talk. They hate each other. And, of course, we've talked about it on this program. We've talked about it on the radio show. We want to see that wrath of Payton on the sidelines. I thought we missed that at times this season, even going back to that Dallas game where he was rather stoic. Bradley, I'll start with you. This is not, in my opinion, Rob Ryan's fault, the difficulties on defense. It is personnel that are not playing up to their potential. Injuries have hurt them. What do you think about Rob Ryan and him returning next year? And what do you think about their relationship from the outside looking in?
I mean, outside looking in, every time the TV catches them arguing with each other, yelling with each other, gesticulating wildly in front of each other, it's going to look bad, and people are going to start speculating because that's what we naturally do as humans is, oh, we see something, this has got to be this. It may not be as bad as it appears, when you see it on TV. I think the better the defense does in these final 4 games, the better chance is that Rob Ryan comes back. But that's 4 games left that the Saints should do well. We don't know how they will do. We've talked about it before. Mm-hmm. We based our preseason expectations off of what we thought the players were going to do.
Yes.
Rob Ryan can only coach what he has on his team, and if they're not playing up to their best level, what can he do? He can't go on the field and tell them, you should be doing this, so let's do it now. And it's not all his fault. And I think the coach gets a little bit more of the blame than he should.
Yeah. Of course, he got a lot of the credit last year.
Got a lot of the credit last year. It goes both ways.
Yeah, no doubt. Jude, what can you add? Can we see a Dennis Allen sighting in the future of the New Orleans Saints?
I don't want to get that far ahead of things when there's so much to play for this season, but it's perception versus reality that even hits inside the locker room. Everybody expected the Saints to be a double-digit win team again and a Super Bowl contender. So did Sean Payton. So did Rob Ryan. When things didn't go their way to start and for most of this season, you have to believe those egos were hurt. And you do start to naturally point fingers when you don't think, well, I'm holding up my end of the bargain, so it has to be somebody else's fault. And I think that 2 bombastic type personalities when things aren't going well, butting heads shouldn't surprise people. You're absolutely right, though. I think how the season ends is going to tell the tale, guys, as to whether Rob Ryan sticks around. I think he's done a good job with the personnel he's been given, even this year.
What I will add to that is you talk about 2 bombastic styles. Greg Williams was very bombastic.
Absolutely.
And there was an interesting little dynamic going on there. But you could tell the difference between Greg Williams and Rob Ryan and how things are going, because Rob Ryan, I think, still respects Sean and kind of respects the way things are handled with the Saints franchise. And so he doesn't say anything. He doesn't go to the side after the cameras are off and kind of start shooting his mouth off. Greg Williams did that. I think you saw that whole thing blow up in the end, and that's why I think Rob Ryan actually still has a chance here.
Yeah. It was almost like Greg Williams was the quote-unquote head coach of the defense and felt that was his unit and he could do what he wished. And on the flip side, I think that maybe Peyton learned a lesson from that, and Ryan maybe a little bit less. He's as flamboyant as anybody else when you start talking about defensive coordinators out there, including a Greg Williams. But when you look at it, I think that that Williams in a lot of cases kind of burned his bridge. I don't think Ryan has burnt his bridge yet.
I think Rob Ryan's the type of person that understands people. I think he understands the business. Certainly he should, considering a deep coaching family within the National Football League. And he's a guy who I think understands Sean Payton's personality and can relate. And sure, there's going to be issues when things aren't going well. But unlike a Greg Williams, who I think in the end was probably more full of himself and will be to the very end, Ryan understands the bigger picture, and he understands what it means to have a boss. And if he can do his job and the Saints can get into the postseason, Rob Ryan will be around next year.
Interesting that Peyton kind of dropped that he felt that information came from a former defensive coordinator. I think we all thought immediately Greg Williams. And then you think about the relationship between the Williams and the Ryan family, and maybe you put two and two together, and maybe we're thinking a little bit too much out of the box on this one. But I hope that he gets another opportunity. I think that, again, the players have underachieved. The injuries have really hurt him, and I'd like to at least see him, again, have a team with full strength. Same thing happened to him in Dallas. Let's move on. Are the Saints looking for Drew Brees' replacement in the draft? Guys, when I heard this report, the first thing I laughed was because, first of all, Brees' replacement in the draft, it's still, I think, a little early. And when you look at this team right now, you have so many other glaring needs. Would you really spend a high draft choice on a quarterback?
I think that the two reports coming out this weekend are related in the situation. The Saints were expected to get the doors blown off in Pittsburgh and to continue their slide. So when you have sources that are disgruntled within the organization or see the tide turning a certain way, they're going to tell the people they know in the business what they think is going to happen. They want to be first out there as sources for the worst case scenario. Their egos involved from the top to the bottom of any organization, particularly in pro sports. Sure, you need to eventually start thinking about a young quarterback to groom because they clearly don't have one, and you don't know how much further that Drew Brees is going to be able to take you. A couple more years on his contract, although I think a renegotiation is coming because of the salary cap issues coming up in the offseason. It's just common sense. Just because they're thinking young quarterback, they might be thinking young quarterback who's a steal early like Aaron Rodgers was when Green Bay still had Brett Favre, but he didn't play for several seasons. They may be more willing to take a guy that's their best player on the board at quarterback earlier this time around. I think that's what that report really tells you.
I do. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I've heard it said that maybe Sean leaked that because he wanted to light a fire. I'm not saying it happened, and I'm also not saying that I don't think it didn't happen because Sean's a smart man. Here's a guy who knows in general been able to get his players going and knowing exactly what buttons to push.
Yes.
And it wouldn't surprise me if he did that. I mean, that's kind of what he does. He knows how to use the media, especially the national media. He knows how to use specific instruments around the facility to get the players going. And maybe he thought this was the time. I'm not saying he did it.
Right.
I'm also not saying he didn't do it.
Right. Well, if he did, it worked.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think Brees looked like Brees on Sunday against Pittsburgh. 5 touchdowns, 9 different receivers, and again, no turnovers. Did not force the football. This is one of the things that again, I think a lot of us have been pulling our hair out about. Just the fact that that he's still got it in him. He's not a descending quarterback. But again, his decision-making has left a lot to be desired. A lot of that, again, to his credit, under duress. I mean, running for his life. Guys, your thoughts on Brees?
Well, Brees has looked like Brees if you look at the numbers. You look at a guy who's still leading the league in completion percentage for most of the season. It's just been those fatal mistakes that have helped heap on the misery to the Saints. We didn't see that against Pittsburgh. We saw a perfect performance. He just needs to have more of that. He can't have the throws like he had against the Lions, against the Browns, the ones that come immediately to mind for a team that is going to be in close games because of their weaknesses. He's going to have to keep them in games. He's going to have to win them games, and just as importantly, he can't make the fatal error that costs them games.
Yeah.
And I kind of wrote about this after the game this week, was he didn't force anything to Jimmy Graham.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you need to take Jimmy out of the offense. Jimmy has to be in the offense. There's zero question about his role and what he means. But with Drew having such a game that he had against Pittsburgh and being able to move the ball around and not let Pittsburgh catch on to who he's kind of tuning in on, I think that opens the offense even more. And there's so many times this season especially where Drew has focused in on Jimmy Graham that he's thrown the ball into triple coverage when he shouldn't because he has too much trust in Jimmy.
Yes.
He throws it, in a position that maybe he used to think Jimmy could get it, but he can't because it's behind him. There's been too much reliance on Jimmy, and I think it's gotten Drew in trouble. And by not throwing to him, by playing smart, by not making the mistakes where he's throwing the ball when he's getting sacked, if he can stick with doing that, then I think his replacement's coming way on down the line. Not necessarily
the targets
next year.
on many of those interceptions were Breeze to Graham, and
Yes.
Graham didn't see a target against Pittsburgh. Steelers said we're completely taking him away, and you see the results. Why? Because guys like Kenny Stills, Marcus Colston, your collection of backs when they're available, and maybe even Nick Toon can play a little bit in this league.
Well, and that was where I was going to go next. All of a sudden, these young wide receivers start to emerge. I mean, Nick Toon emerged. Kenny Stills had one of his best games as a pro. You look at Marcus Colston, been inconsistent all season long, but he had a decent game as well. And again, you mentioned Pierre Thomas come back. He's obviously a great panacea when you start talking about a guy out of the back who can catch the football. So, all of a sudden you start seeing the ball spread around like the Saints used to spread the football around.
And I think that was a big part of the win on Sunday. Was all of a sudden the Steelers had no idea where the ball was going. It could have gone to any number of targets. And when the offense has been super successful in the past, it's because Drew was moving the ball around. It's because you didn't know what was coming next. And if they can keep doing that and letting Stills and letting Toon and letting Cadet and letting these young guys really start getting confident in themselves, sky's the limit.
And there's no reason that they can't, because look at the teams coming up. The Panthers are falling apart. Right. The Bears' defense isn't very good. The Falcons' defense can be had. You can win these games with that game plan that won in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and Tampa Bay as well. I mean,
they're a little. That could be a tough game. If you need a win there, look at their results at home.
Well,
those have been close games, even against good teams.
To the phone lines we go. 866-3200. Let's head to New Orleans East and Tanis. Tanis, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports.
Yes, how you doing?
How are you, Tanis?
My biggest thing with the Saints is, with Breeze is, and when crunch time comes, he stay in the pocket, and that was my biggest thing with him. And we lost 2 games like that with him staying in the pocket and getting sacked and causing a fumble. I don't know, why they're not coaching him and telling him, look, get out the pocket, man. If the game is on the line.
Tanis, thank you for the phone call. Let me have the panel answer that. Bradley, your thoughts? He is a pocket passer, feels more comfortable stepping up in the pocket, not a guy that throws the ball well on the run.
No, the Saints know who they are. Drew knows who he is. Sean Payton knows who he's coaching. All of a sudden doing all these rollouts, it's not going to change things for the better. So I think having him stay in the pocket, calling plays that may help him out, get the ball out quickly, will continue to help him.
And you have to remember the full definition of what is the pocket. And unfortunately for Drew Brees, he hasn't had the confidence in the interior of his offensive line, a highly paid bunch that he has had in recent years. So some of those issues with ball security in the pocket have been not stepping up with the confidence that he has shown in the past, because let's face it, Ben Grubbs, Jari Evans haven't played as well in the last year plus as they did before, particularly in pass blocking, which is where they earn their money.
Well, and I'll throw Jonathan Goodwin in there as well. Jonathan Goodwin started off really well. He has not been the same player since the injury. As I go back and look at the games a second time and I concentrate on that offensive line, you can see missed blocks. You can see guys that are beating players off the line of scrimmage. The interior of that offensive line is not what it used to be. Guys are getting older, it seemed like quickly, and slower. The slower foot. At times last week, they max protected. I mean, there was one scenario in the third quarter where they kept literally 8 guys in to block, 2 players in a pattern, and of course, Breeze got sacked, but It was called back because of holding on the Pittsburgh Steelers, defensive holding, which again was mind-boggling on both sides. But I mean, I don't know how many games the Saints can win if they ultimately are only going to have 2 players going into a pattern and 8 guys blocking. But you know, they're having to max protect a little bit more because of again that really honestly that offensive line aging before our eyes. 866-3200 to Slidell and Harris. Harris, welcome. You're on Inside New Orleans Sports.
Hey, Eric. Thanks for taking my call. I appreciate it. The question that I have, it's regarding the personnel decision and who's making those evaluations. You look at since Sean Payton's been there, we've had mixed results with the first and second rounders, and we've done pretty well with late picks and undrafted free agents. So I'm wondering, where's the disconnect? How are we able to find undrafted free agents that can contribute but don't have much success with our first and second rounders?
That's a great question, Harris. Thank you for the phone call. Bradley, your thoughts? If you look at the history of the drafts under Payton, really, honestly, when they've had bad drafts, they've supplemented those drafts by undrafted free agents coming in and making the team.
I'm not really sure I have an answer for that. It's a little bit mind-boggling that they have had the success they've had in undrafted free agents or having, guys come in on. You look at Kyrie Robinson. Here's a guy who wasn't even an undrafted rookie free agent. He came in on a tryout.
Right.
But I think the Saints get a little bit more credit than they deserve in drafting. You look at the 2006 draft class was incredible.
Yes.
2009 draft class, pretty darn good. But other than that, last year, the guys are showing up a little bit, but I'm still not sold on them. I can't tell you, how well they've done in the draft. So, Ryan Pace is the guy that I think does a decent job. He's the guy that kind of goes out and finds some of these gems. I'm not sure that they have a good system down, though, to find out. And really, you look at it, I'm sorry, I'm changing topics here a little bit, but you look at it, they've had decent success on offense. The defense is where they've had the biggest problems drafting.
And that's where they've drafted high.
That's where they've drafted a lot of.
Right. Jude, what can you add?
You have to give the scouting department credit because they were able to find these undrafted gems. But at the same time, that's after nearly 300 draft picks are made each and every year. You have to be pretty lucky in order to get those gems. The problem is, we'll just look at this year. They're getting nothing out of their draft right now from this year. They traded up to get a wide receiver that we're seeing. Did they really need, based on the emergence of a Kenny Stills, give Toon one more chance? You do have an elite tight end. You still believe apparently in Marcus Colston, although we'll see after this year. Did you really need that as much as you needed help in other areas that cost you a third-round pick? And then in the second round, you take a project that's been such a project that another undrafted guy, Brian Dixon, is getting all the playing time ahead of him. When that happens repeatedly, when it's more than just going back to Antonio Pittman versus Pierre Thomas in 2007, it seems to happen again and again. Junior Gallette's the best pass rusher you've been able to get your hands on, undrafted free agent. You have to wonder, why are you wasting, because that's what it is. It has to be called waste with your draft picks.
Yeah, no doubt. 866-3200 is the phone number, guys. Speaking of running backs, when you look at this team right now, Ingram, a little bit of a toe injury and I think an ankle injury right now, was limited in practice today. But Pierre Thomas is back, and we're hearing Kyrie Robinson's coming back. This running game has really kind of helped this offense, and at times when they've been struggling throwing the football, they've been able to run the football consistently.
There's no question that balance tells the tale as far as the success we've seen in this part of the season with the Saints offense. If you have a running back that's running over 100 yards, the play action is there. It backs off the pass rush, and that needs to continue for this team to be successful because, again, if you see an offensive line and the older players that are declining a bit, if you give them a running game so they can play more downhill, that's going to open up much more for Sean Payton. I know he'd rather go out there and be the mastermind and have this passing game work where he throws to 9 different receivers and does it his way and doesn't need a running game. It's just there. But this team isn't equipped to do that. And he has gotten the memo and looked at the film and seen what we've seen throughout this season. And Mark Ingram's given him a great reason why, because he's proven that he can be the workhorse back finally, that they traded up to get. That one working out.
I mean, since week 8, he's leading the NFL. Mark Ingram's leading the NFL in running. You know, he had his 4th 100-yard game against Pittsburgh.
122.
It's what the team needed. It's when things weren't working, when Sean Payton kept throwing the ball, when Drew Brees kept throwing interceptions. he needed to scope, he being Sean Payton, needed to go back to the run game, because if you can do that and you can do it consistently, and you don't need to get 150 yards on the ground, but you need to do it enough to give, like you said, the line time to block, to give Drew time to trust the line to block, it's going to work out. And they really got back in the game against Pittsburgh, after kind of a rough first quarter, by running the ball a little bit. And I think that's the biggest thing that's helping this team right now. And
you're masking the deficiencies on defense, because you're keeping that defense off the field, which I think is really critical. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come right back. We'll talk a little bit more about the defense. We'll talk about Carolina, and then we'll get into the Pelicans, LSU, and Tulane. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Every Thursday night right here on WLAE TV with our live broadcast at 6 p.m. On Fridays, you can catch us at 10 p.m. here on WLAE, and on Pelican Sports Television in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette at 9 p.m. on Fridays. Our guest tonight, Bradley Handwerger, freelance journalist, and also Jude Young of SportsNola.com. Don't go anywhere.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504-304-4125 or brisbeesrestaurant.com. At Natal's Air Conditioning, our motto is service honoring the golden rule. We're dedicated to providing the best air conditioning solution for your home or business in the New Orleans metro area. More information is available at 504-821-0005. Natal's Air Conditioning, a proud sponsor of the St. Jude Dream Home. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters, as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile. You're watching WLAE, New Orleans Public Television. Find us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Our guest tonight, Jude Young of SportsNola.com and 990 AM WGSO, and freelance journalist Bradley Handwerger. 866-3200 is the phone number if you'd like to get involved, question or comment. Feel free to call in. And guys, let's shift gears to the Saints defense. Finally, a semblance of a pass rush. Cam Jordan emerged against Pittsburgh, but they still are struggling against the run. As I've went back and looked at the games a second time, I've noticed it in live when I'm seeing it live. But teams are running right at Junior Galette. I mean, they have tried to flip-flop the ends. It doesn't matter. Junior Galette is a liability when it comes to the running game. But finally, you get a little bit of a pass rush. That secondary is so decimated that at least you can kind of mask that deficiency some. Bradley, your thoughts so far on how this really front four, and then we'll get into the front seven, is playing?
Junior's a one-trick pony. Like Junior, says a lot of good things, says a lot of funny things.
$41 million, 23 guaranteed.
But a lot of money was given to a guy who is really, when you boil it down, a pass rusher. Not a great run guy. Has never been a great run guy. And I think the one thing that we've seen when the Saints have played well on defense here lately is that Cam Jordan is showing up. All of a sudden, he's playing like the guy that they expected to play coming into the season. And Akeem Hicks plays really well and kind of takes some of the pressure off the linebackers and gets in there in the middle and kind of does some stuff. And then John Jenkins is giving them a little stuff. But Junior, when it comes to the first and second down runs, is the weak point of that defense. And you just kind of have to live with it at this point because there's nobody else on the roster that's going to take that spot.
Yeah.
And I think with Galette, you have to point out that not only is he a one-trick pony, but sometimes with that trick, he's a bit undisciplined.
Yeah.
Losing containment has been a big problem for him as well.
Sure, huh?
And it's happened on a regular basis. Yeah. I can even think, preparing this week for knowing the rematch with the Panthers, the one big play that Newton was able to make for a touchdown, there was a blitz from the opposite side. The only place Newton was going to be able to go to roll out, because they were bringing more numbers than Carolina could block, would be towards his left, towards Galette. Galette ran right past him. Newton ran into the end zone, about a 13-yard touchdown run. That should never happen, but it did because Galette did not take care of his full responsibilities. You hate to point it out, but it's true. It's been an issue. The 51-yard pass, Kaepernick, I mean, you have to point it out. Why did it happen? In part because Galette let him get away and roll out, and that's been a regular problem for a guy that I know he's paid to rush the passer, but if you're going to play every down, you have a lot more work to do than just that.
Well, Jude, you are so right. As the Saints prepare for the Carolina Panthers this week, it's one of the things that I'm worried about, the ability to be able to contain Cam Newton. If you make him a passer, you can beat the Panthers. And again, realizing that you got to contain, it's something that, again, they've been undisciplined at times, and it really starts with Galette.
Don't let him buy time for mediocre receivers. This is a team in a world of hurt, Carolina. 6-game losing streak?
Yeah.
That shouldn't change. It should be 7. The Saints should handle their business, really. The offense should have its way for the most part. If the defense doesn't give up big plays, I don't think this Carolina team is going to be able to put drives together in the dome with that added noise advantage. The pass rush should be able to be there, but you have to be disciplined. If you make Newton throw from the pocket, his mechanics break down, and he just doesn't have the weapons to work with. So that's another criticism on another show in another city. What's wrong with Cam Newton? It's part Newton and it's part the personnel around him.
And that offensive line for the Panthers is just not that good. It really isn't. Bradley, what can you add about this weekend's game against the Panthers?
Well, I just think, when the Saints started off the season as poorly as they did and kind of went through this downtime, the 3-game home losing streak, you knew the talent was there. You knew that if things went right, they could turn it around. You don't have that feeling with the Panthers. That is a team that had basically a fire sale in the offseason, didn't bring anybody back that they probably needed to bring back in the defensive backfield, at receiver, and they've got a bunch of old running backs. The offensive line has problems. Cam Newton, I'm still not sold on, even if as good as he was last year. So, I think the Panthers are where the Panthers are supposed to be, looking at the team. And the Saints, if they come in, like you said, play discipline, take advantage of the crowd noise, use the fast track that is the turf and the Superdome, they should get out of this game with an easy win.
Right. Defensively, when you look at the secondary right now, how decimated it is, and I've talked about it on the radio show, it really, because of a lack of now quality safeties that Ryan likes to play, and we saw that last year with multiple safety looks, that means that linebackers are on the field, and unfortunately the Saints linebackers just don't cover well. We saw it last week in the zone defense against Pittsburgh, and we've seen it consistently all season long, the inability for Hawthorne, Humber, or Lofton to be able to cover, and now you're in a situation where you're asking linebackers, when you're going to your nickel and dime in some cases, to stay in the game. So again, this has hurt them on that end, and then now in the past where you've had safeties that have been able to blitz the passer, now you're asking linebackers to do it, and quite frankly, whether it's Humber, Lofton, or Hawthorne, they're just not quick enough to get to the quarterback. So, when you look at that secondary and you look at the injuries there, it's hurt across the board, not just in the secondary, but it's affected the linebackers as well.
It's taken away the ability to use that versatile 3-safety look we saw a lot last year, and what they were shifting to early this year after trying to be more traditional on the back end. You have linebackers that are so limited. Lofton's a great box-to-box run stopper. That's what he does. We've seen Hawthorne lose a step that made him a pretty good coverage linebacker, a guy who played well in zone in particular in Seattle. He doesn't do that anymore, and Humber's a backup. So they're really poor there, and to ask them to have more to do, they don't blitz well either. You look at their scouting reports, you knew none of those guys were going to give you much as blitzers. They don't. So you're playing with a lot of liabilities. I think that's what Rob Ryan would be telling Sean Payton when he's getting the hairdryer treatment, if you will.
Yeah. Brother,
you're playing with one cornerback in Lewis, whose knee isn't the healthiest. It's bulky, as our friend Jeff Duncan likes to use.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's you're playing with a cornerback on the other side, and Patrick Robinson, who I believe I read today said that when somebody asked him, how he's playing well, all of a sudden he said, it's about time. Well, if he's saying that to himself, what is that saying? You know, Corey White's not the best, and Brian Dixon's a guy who came in off the street, basically. Right. There's just a lot of pieces on this team that weren't there at the beginning of the season, or aren't necessarily the guys you want on the field every down. So, I would make the argument that what Rob Ryan has gotten out of this team, especially in the last couple of games, has been heroic.
Pierre Warren's coming off the street playing free safety for you, and might be a little bit better than what we were seeing earlier, huh? Yeah. I mean, he's done a decent job. He really has.
He's at the ball. You can see that he has a good nose for what's going on. And, it's funny. I read Roman Harper was talking in Carolina about how they're basically saying, all right, Roman, you're out there, but everybody else, new. We're just going to start all over. It's going to be a bunch of young guys. And he said, these young guys come out here and they don't know what they're doing wrong, so they just go out there and play. And I think you're seeing that with a Pierre Warren, a guy who doesn't know enough to know that he's doing it wrong, so he's just going out there and finding the ball. And maybe that's what this team needs to do. And
that's part of necessity being the mother of invention. When you look at Patrick Robinson, his season looked dead in the water, but they needed something out of him, and they had a big void that several players couldn't fill in the slot. He had never played the slot before, and that's where he's found a bit of a home, and that might be his future in the league. I think that IQ-wise on the field, he's a bit limited. In the slot, it's a pretty simple assignment, and he's got the athleticism to play there. Kenny Vaccaro couldn't do it. Marcus Ball certainly couldn't do it. And having to move White to the outside, somebody had to fill that spot, and him doing that gives the Saints a fighting chance.
Yeah. Travaris Cadet has a hamstring injury. We're not sure what's going to happen with him going forward. They bring in Jalen Saunders off Seattle's practice squad to try to resuscitate this return game, which I got to tell you, in the history of the Saints, and I've been there since '67, I can't remember special teams not being able to return either kicks or punts, at least to be able to get some type of yardage. This has been mind-boggling.
But this is not a season-long issue. This has been for a couple of seasons now, and Greg McMahon may be the nicest guy on that staff. He is an incredible human being. I don't know if he's the man for the job at this point.
Is that a fault for Peyton? Because I had someone call last week that was upset by the fact that Rob Ryan or any defensive coordinator can't bring his guys in. When you come and you work for Peyton, if you're a coordinator, no matter what, you got to deal with Peyton's guys. Has he maybe fallen in love with his buddies too much, and maybe there should be an upgrade along that coaching staff?
In this case, fellow college alum.
Yeah.
That's a big issue to me. Remember, Darren Sproles, and we thought this way too from seeing him play for the Saints, he was washed up as a kick returner. He had lost a step. I don't know if you've watched Philadelphia games this year. That was flat out wrong. They have the best special teams in the league. That helps show you that the Saints may have the worst, one of the worst, although Carolina coming to town after the 2 block punt returns for touchdowns. It's going to be an interesting battle in that department.
Nothing like your mouth to
That's right. That's the NFC South in a nutshell.
There you go. 866-3200. Mike is in Covington. Mike, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports.
Yeah, I'd like to know why some more people ain't talking about Randy Mueller, the general manager of the Saints, because his draft picks aren't working out, and his free agents he's bringing in, they're not working out. So why don't some people start talking about him a little bit?
Thanks for the phone call, Mike. Is Randy Mueller even still in the league?
Mickey Loomis would probably want to blame Randy Mueller for anything that's going wrong in the front office.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, Sean Payton calls the shots here. At the end of the day, the buck stops with him.
I'll say the one thing I'll say about Mickey Loomis is he knows his role and he knows how to handle his role, and it is basically to put everything on him. Take all the heat off of Sean. You don't hear a lot of people say Sean should do this, Sean should do that. As far as drafting, it's like, well, Mickey's doing this, Mickey's making the calls. Well, Mickey's not doing a whole heck of a lot other than being the CEO of the front office, and he knows his role. He knows how to handle his role. I don't know that he's going anywhere because I know that he has a really good relationship with the Bensons. He has a really good relationship with Sean Payton.
He's on the board of directors.
He's pretty entrenched.
Yeah, he is. Guys, I'll start with you first, Jude. Does this team make the playoffs?
Well, if I had a crystal ball and could tell you what happens in that Atlanta game, second to last week of the season, I could answer that. I don't. I think that's going to be a last team has the ball wins situation, and whoever wins it will go to the playoffs. And I don't have enough faith in the Saints, even at home, to say that they'll gain their revenge on Atlanta. So I know that's copping out, but it's quite clear whoever wins that game is going to win the division. The
Saints play a schedule of Final Four. Their opponents are 15, 32-1. Atlanta's schedule is, I think it's 25, 24-1. The schedule says the Saints should make the playoffs. You know, they've got the toughest game they have left is going to be at Chicago on a Monday night, because it's a Monday night game in a city that's going to be really cold.
Yes.
They don't really do well in the cold. I mean, actually, you know, I say don't really do well in the cold. I think you can actually throw that out after what they did in Philadelphia last year. But Atlanta's at home. They have Carolina at home. Tampa is a wild card, but very beatable on the road. In all honesty, this team should go 3-1 to finish out.
But tie goes to Atlanta. Atlanta can go 2-2, with one of them being the Saints, and they'll be fine. And I tell you what, that's that game before the Saints had home against Pittsburgh. I expect Atlanta to win that game, because I don't believe in Pittsburgh. This is a Pittsburgh team that's lost at home to Tampa, of all people, that seems to have a real void defensively and has to win shootouts a lot of the time. So to expect them to go to Atlanta and win a shootout the way Atlanta handled the Arizona defense last week, I'm not. So I think it comes down to Saints and Atlanta, and the Saints can't afford to lose that game.
Let's shift gears to the New Orleans Pelicans. They're at 500, get ready to get on another road swing tonight. They'll take on the Golden State Warriors in a nationally televised game. They signed Dante Cunningham to play for them today, a power forward who will be expected to play small forward. The rumor mill is rolling. Gal Mickel is a point guard, 6'3" point guard. And he played recently with the Dallas Mavericks. They tried to get him on the Indiana Pacers when they were depleted last year, but he had a visa problem. We're hearing that they're going to go to Israel, and he's going to be on this team very, very shortly, if not within the next week. Had Nakia Hogan on my radio show today, beat writer for the Pelicans for the Picayune, and one of the things he talked about was that they are actively shopping everyone but Anthony Davis right now. Guys, how many times can you blow this thing up and start all over again? I want to give a little credit to Bradley Handwerger, because on this program last year, he made the comment about Dell Demps, saying that Dell Demps, and I want to quote you correctly here, Dell Demps is putting together this team like he's playing a fantasy basketball. And right now, when you look at it, the possibility of having to blow this thing up again, Bradley, I think your words are ringing true.
Nothing says success like trying to get players who are going to play 2 or 3 minutes a night for you and pay them. I don't know what they're doing. I don't think they know what they're doing. I mean, I said a while back that Monty Williams wasn't the coach for this team, and this was a couple years ago. This wasn't even like last year or this year, although this year I think it's showing itself even more. The talent this team has, they should be a little bit better or more competitive than they have been in some of these games. But Dell Demps, I don't understand his philosophy. And I don't know that he's talking to anybody on the coaching staff to say, what do y'all want? I just think it's like, all right, I don't like the way your hair is this morning. You're going over there. And you, those pants are too long. I want you to, you're off to another team. It's the only way I can figure out that he's making this team.
Right.
The Tyreek Evans move. I like Tyreek Evans as a player, probably more than I know more than you do from comments I've heard you make over time. I think it's important to point out that when that move was made and the money you committed, which isn't going to wind up being a bad contract when it's all said and done, and they may wind up having to move him, that may be the guy.
I think that is the guy, honestly.
That the void was clearly with the length on the wings. He doesn't fill that void. When the move was made, you scratched your head and said, well, you have Eric Gordon and you can't move him, and he's a 2-guard. Tyreek Evans is a 2-guard. You can't commit that kind of money to a 6-man when, oh, by the way, you already have Ryan Anderson, who's a wonderful asset, having to play behind perhaps the best player in the league we'll be talking about with Anthony Davis in a couple of years. He's getting close quickly as it is. So yeah, fantasy basketball, you can't just collect assets to collect assets when your job's on the line. And I'm worried that this could be the reactionary move that Dell Demps uses to try to save his job that winds up putting the next GM, if there is one soon, in a deeper hole.
Well, again, right now when you look at this team, this was all kind of a domino effect from what happened with Eric Gordon. Now, we understand that it's a torn labrum. I'm going to turn to you for a moment, Bradley, and there's a lot of talk. There's a possibility the Pelicans can use an injury exception if he definitely goes on injury reserve. But he is out there looking and trying to find a doctor that'll say that he doesn't need surgery at this point. Same injury as Drew Brees. I don't know how you come back and allow rest to allow a torn labrum to heal.
I mean, rest isn't going to let it heal the way it needs to heal. So, I mean, you look at the way Eric Gordon has handled all of his injuries here. You look at what's going on now. I wonder if he has had some kind of bad experience with physicians in the past, because I don't know a single athlete who isn't going to say, I don't want that surgery because I don't want to get back on the floor. They're all going to say, I want to get on the floor as quickly as I can and do whatever you need to do to get me back playing. And that hasn't been the case with him. It's always been, well, I need a third doctor to tell me what's wrong with me. Well, the first two doctors probably were right. Not going to lie. They're generally pretty smart with what they're doing. Mm-hmm. They know how to read an X-ray or an MRI or a CT scan. So I don't know that Eric is handling this well.
Is there any scenario where a completely torn labrum is not going to be a surgical procedure?
Not that I know of.
I think it's cut and dry what he's going to need to do, and that is have the surgery. But Eric Gordon is the definition of an introvert, and it's very odd to be dealing with an introvert who has injury problems, who sees himself as a superstar. Maybe he was finally starting to see himself for what he's going to have to be moving forward, the way he was trying to fit into roles early in the season. Mm-hmm. That was one positive that we were seeing, but it wasn't giving great results. He's going to continue to be an odd character because introverted people tend to have problems relating to people and seeing the big pictures, and they tend to be very protective, trusting doctors, trusting even teammates and coaches. That could be a real issue with Eric Gordon, like he needed another one.
Well, Jude, we talked about it before the show started. 5.3, 5.4 million injury exception. That can be traded if they need to trade that.
Right.
They can use that to be able to bring a player on for one season. That's one season only. This team needs help on the bench right now. This may be the worst bench in the NBA. I mean, again, nobody's getting scared by Babbitt and Fredette. And over the hill, John Salmons, Agenza, Withy, or even a guy like Austin Rivers at this point. So they don't have a bench. The only bench they have is Ryan Anderson at this point. And they've got to do something if they truly want to make a run to the playoffs. And man, that money could come in handy in terms of at least trying to supplement this roster. I mean, they're going out and getting guys that are not even in the league right now.
That money could go a long way towards a mega deal, so to speak, a big deal that involves one of your quote-unquote key pieces. If the rumors are true and everybody's on the trading block except Davis, you add a $5.3 million exception to that, you could bring in assets, multiple assets. You have enough players where, say, if an Evans went and you still had Holiday, you still have Davis, you still have Anderson, you've got, you hear that a lot in the NBA, the big three since LeBron when he went to Miami. You try to have at least three core guys who can carry you and build around that. They have nothing to build around, maybe five good assets right now that don't necessarily fit together. That exception could help. So that's another reason why I'm sure Dell Demps wants Eric Gordon to face the music and own up to the fact that surgery's in his future, because then Demps can be more aggressive.
You can make a run in the playoffs with a relatively short bench, but you got to have two players at the very least.
Quality players.
Quality. Well, you have one. I mean, again, like
right.
Ryan Anderson
Right.
is one of the best.
But there's a huge void at the three.
Huge void at the three, and you don't have a seventh guy, so to speak. And Austin Rivers isn't that guy. I mean, I know that's the one that Monty really turns to often, but he's not the guy.
Just can't finish. Still, even today, can't finish.
So I'm not sure that, one piece, when you consider that there's nobody behind Anderson, and there is no three right now who's legit.
You need to take one of those guys and turn it into three role players who can fill a role. A lot of your bench in the NBA is made up of a guy who has one great skill, whether he's a shooter, a defender, or rebounder. Other than Jimmer Fredette, I know his skill as a shooter. You look at that bench and you go, well, Babbitt's a stretch four, but you already have Ryan Anderson.
Right.
That's redundant. Ajinka's just a backup center.
Sure.
And, other than that, who do you have? You don't have anybody. John Salmons shouldn't even be in the league.
No, agreed. That's mind-boggling. And you made a comment a little bit earlier before the show started. A little overpaid a little bit for Sounds.
And they should have said, we're only going to sign you for the minimum, and they gave him a little bit more. It's not going to make a big deal in the bottom line, but they gave him 1.8 instead of around 1.1. But that's another $700,000 that could come in handy when you really might need to squeeze a trade in here to try to salvage a season.
Well, especially when you've got $15 million wrapped up in Eric Gordon, and as we discussed earlier, that's 3-4 backup players in the NBA. I mean, if you're going to say a backup player in the NBA averages about $3 million a year, a quality backup player, well, you're looking at 3 right there, maybe 4 guys that you could bring in that could have given you that solid bench to go along with obviously the starting 5. It's water on the bridge right now. I said it a few weeks ago. You almost got to throw the salary out. You hope you can get something out of the potential of Eric Gordon. They haven't. It's been a bust. It's a bad deal. The best you can hope for right now is to get an injury settlement from him and move on next year. But again, the clock is ticking on Anthony Davis. Right. You've got to prove to him you can put a championship team on the floor. And it's not from Benson not wanting to spend the money. It's the bad moves that are being made right now by the front office.
Well, it's like Chris Paul redo because redo. I don't even know what redo is. Redo, because a lot of it was, what are we going to do to keep Chris Paul here? Because we have to make some kind of move, and they were never able to do what they needed to do. And Anthony Davis is young, but he's their franchises are going to give him the moon if he wants it.
Chicago's already talking about it right now, about trying to win back home.
They need to do something here to make sure that he stays.
And that analogy is Tyreke Evans your James Posey. That move that you shouldn't have made to think, we really need this one more piece. Maybe he's our 6th man, maybe he's a starter, and then you wind up losing all flexibility with the salary cap to make the moves you really need to make once the season gets going. Right. And trades can make a big difference.
Well, the problem with Evans is redundancy. You had a guy like that in Eric Gordon for the most part, who was maybe a little better outside shooter, but you bring in the same type of guy.
But you really didn't have a guy because he's not on the floor.
But Drew Holiday, he's a former all-star point guard. He needs to have the ball in his hands. And you have to have Tyreke Evans have the ball in his hands to be most effective.
That's a good point. LSU is 8-4. They're waiting now on their bowl bid. Guys, I got to tell you right now, I'm sitting there Thanksgiving night after the turkey and the stuffing and all the fixings, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, let's see what's going to happen here. Finally used the read option, finally used the pistol formation, finally played to the strength of their quote-unquote dual quarterback. Again, it's been the most glaring deficiency on this team all season long. And I'll start with you, Brad. I'm wondering, where has that been? Where has that package been all year long?
We talked about that early in the season when I was on the show. I guess at some point they had some time off and they were like, well, let's throw it in and see what we can do. But, you look at Cam Cameron, he's a smart guy. He's coached some really good quarterbacks. He knows what he's doing. Obviously, the offense was humming when Mettenberger was there. And I think there's a little bit of a tendency for these coaches to get in there and say, all right, this is what I do. This is what I know how to teach well, and this is what we're going to do. That's not what Jennings is. That's not what Harris is. But I think maybe he took the week off and said, all right, the weeks off of the later part of the season, and said, what can I do to help? And maybe this is what they came up with. They realized that having them move the pocket, having them do the reoption was the best way to have this offense operate.
I was in College Station with UNO, so I happened to be able to go to the game. And I can tell you from seeing it in person, it's quite obvious why Texas A&M fired defensive coordinator Mark Turgeon the next morning.
Yes.
This was not a very well-coached defense. It made it easy for LSU to start leaning on the read option because they kept forgetting the assignment on the backside with Anthony Jennings. They made it very easy for Cam Cameron to go with that. So let's not jump the gun too much. Even Jennings could handle that. They should have been successful like they were in that game, and they were winning up front most of the night.
Yes.
They still have major problems moving forward, and if they don't find a quarterback for next season, they're going to waste a national championship caliber team because that young defense is so good.
Yeah. Every single position group, in my opinion, got better except for the quarterback this year. Would you guys agree with that?
Totally.
Absolutely. And in fact, I think that the biggest difference in this team from early to late was the growth of the defense. The defense became a huge asset for this team down the stretch, and it kept an Alabama team from really hammering them when you saw what Alabama did. I know it was at home what Alabama did to Auburn. They kept an Arkansas team that had been rolling offensively 17 points. If LSU's offense had shown up, that would have been a different game.
Exactly right.
It kept a Texas A&M offense from really getting going. That defense is really good, and they're going to be really good next year.
You're giving up 20 points or less a game against the SEC West second half of the season. That's going to win you a lot of football games if you don't have quarterback issues.
Right.
Instead, LSU was a 4-4 SEC team. The same thing will happen next year if they don't find a solution. I don't know if a solution's in the building, because the more you hear about Brandon Harris and his maturity, yes, just a true freshman, yes, just 18 years old, you can't assume that's going to change simply because of Les Miles' track record with the position.
Who can you get? I mean, if you don't know who you are, you don't have an identity. You don't know if you're a team that's going to run the read option, or you're going to be a team that's going to be a pro style drop back. How do you know who to go get? And again, coaches are in the top quarterbacks here going, you don't want to go there. That's where quarterbacks go to die.
Well, the problem you run into now is that, let's say you do go out and get a quarterback in this signing class. Well, now all of a sudden you're back to starting with a true freshman, and you're delaying your success for a year. You have to stick with Jennings or Harris. I mean, you have to find a way to get them to progress in the offseason the way they need to progress.
They're sketchy junior college options this time around. There's no Zach Mettenberger sitting out there. And Mettenberger, by the way, sat out that entire 2011 season, much to many LSU fans' chagrin looking back on it, so he wasn't ready. The only real answer that could be outside of the building this point would be a graduate transfer senior. And maybe Braxton Miller is a guy who could be the answer out of Ohio State, because J.T. Barrett will be healthy and will probably have that job, and he's going to want to play. You're really stretching at this point to find an answer.
But the SEC transfer rules may thwart that.
Right.
Because he may not be able to.
You can't be sure, but certainly if he were available and eligible for an SEC team, that would be an option.
Right. To Hunter and Metairie. Hunter, welcome. You're on Inside New Orleans Sports. How you doing, Hunter?
Hello?
Hey, Hunter. Welcome to the show.
Yes, sir. Boy, that was quick. Regarding LSU, I was raised in Shreveport, but my father played at Fortier down here in New Orleans in the 30s as a tailback before he went into World War II. And so my background regarding the state is kind of mixed. I wanted to ask you guys this. How much of the quandary that we find ourselves in at LSU, and I mean exempt, with the exclusion of Mettenberger, we really haven't had a quarterback since Jamarcus Russell. How much of this falls on Coach Miles, in your view? And what can we do if Jennings and Harris don't work out? What do you feel we can do? Do we recruit another high school player? Is that the solution? I'll hang up now.
Thank you, Hunter.
Thanks, guys.
Guys, we got about 2 minutes left. Go ahead.
How much of it falls on Miles? All of it. He's the head coach. He's the one constant since this problem has started. He inherited Matt Flynn. He inherited Jamarcus Russell. Other than grabbing a JUCO like Mettenberger who worked out, he has not developed a high school quarterback to be any more successful than Jordan Jefferson. That says it all, and that's been under different coordinators, several. So the question has to be, hey, what are you doing, Les? What are you doing with your staff? Who are you trusting moving forward? And we talk about the identity. Do they want dual threats? Do they want pocket passers? They recruit both, and it's just a grab bag. There's no philosophy that sticks with recruiting quarterbacks that fits what Les Miles wants to do. He clearly wants a pro-style power-running team. He should have a pro-style quarterback who can stand in the pocket and make the big throws. We have evidence. That's what Mettenberger was, and Cam Cameron proved he could do the job with the rest of the talent that LSU recruits at other positions.
Bradley, what can you add?
That's the biggest head-scratcher of all of their quarterback situation right now is what Les Miles wants them to be. They want to be a power running team. They want to be a pro-style offense. But they don't have quarterbacks that are in the program right now to do that. So why are they recruiting them?
Why are you recruiting them?
That's the biggest question I have. And to answer his question, that falls on Les Miles.
No question.
He's the one that says, all right, this is the guy we're going after. He's the one signing off on what they want to do.
I think he's asleep at the wheel when it comes to that. I think he leans on Frank Wilson and his staff quite a bit when it comes to recruiting, and he seals the deals. But I don't know if he actually goes shopping for the groceries. I think he pulls out the credit card at the end at the checkout line, and that's a big problem with the quarterback spot. That's one area where he should be very much hands-on, and he isn't. Instead, he seems to be much more hands-on about the play calling and the scheme, and that makes an offensive coordinator's job even more difficult when he doesn't have a good enough quarterback.
I got a minute left. Is he going to be pulling that credit card out at Michigan?
I don't think so. I think Michigan will have a hard time, considering we saw Florida's hire this week. Out of Colorado State, Jim McElwain, he's a good hire, but that's Florida, and they're hiring a guy from Colorado State.
Right.
So Michigan's going to have a hard time pulling anybody. I think Miles at age 61 has it made in Baton Rouge.
He may not have the full faith of the fan base, but he's got the faith of his players.
Right.
I think he's got the faith of the administration. I think he stays. I don't think, with what he's built there, and say what you want, 8-4 is a step back. 8-4 is a step up for a lot of programs.
Yeah.
And they're going to be back to 10-win season soon. So I don't see him going anywhere.
And real quickly,
neither do I.
there's a faction at Michigan that's still against Les Miles,
Right.
and it hasn't gone away.
You are right. Bradley Handwerger, Jude Young, thanks so much for being with us tonight here on Inside New Orleans Sports. And thanks so much for tuning in to Inside New Orleans Sports. Remember the rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night at 10 p.m. right here on WLEE TV and also on Pelican Sports Television in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette. You can catch that at a new time, 9 p.m. You can also catch me on the radio weekdays on 990 AM WGSO from 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. Also, if you missed any of the previous episodes of Inside New Orleans Sports, the television show, or my radio show, Inside New Orleans, you can catch those at ericasher.com as well. Special thanks to our guests, Bradley Handwerger and Jude Young, and also to the WLEE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Donovan Joseph, Kenny Juneau, and my director, William Hill. New Orleans, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you right back here next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. Have a great evening.